One of the things I was noticing this past week is how much noise there is in our world. I'm sure you've noticed as well. Telephones, television, traffic, music. In my house, 2 little children that will chatter on and on and on. AJ was at the point where he'll repeat a word just over and over and over and over. And it was ironic. I watched a promo video for a Christian video organization this past week. And they commented on how busy and how noisy the world is. And then they showed a screen that was a picture of nothing but screens. And it was to promote their company. And it was just, tablets and smartphones and this whole picture, which to me just screamed busy and noisy. I found it quite ironic. It's almost as if we don't know how to get away from it. We don't know how to turn off the TV, how to put down the phone, how to just be in the quiet. Well, I found someplace different to be quiet this past week. AJ woke up early from his nap one day, and Isabel was going down for hers, so I took AJ over to Marshy Point Nature Center over on Eastern, where I'm sure many of you all have been before. The driveway's long enough that you can't hear the traffic on Eastern. It's right up on the water, which is fantastic. And other than AJ's excitement about the water, because he was quite excited about water, it was quiet. And you know what you can do really well when it's quiet? Is to listen. Tucked into that great passage from Isaiah with the invitation for all who are thirsty to come to the water, and the end about how God's ways are not our ways. In the middle of that, in verse 3, God says, listen so that you may live. Listen so that you may live. Who would have thought that the key to living is listening? The problem is we don't see it modeled for us very many places. And there are a lot of things that keep us from listening. One of the biggest problems, of course, is when you can't understand the speaker. They may talk too fast, like I know I am very guilty of, and I apologize. And please let me know when I talk too fast and slow me down. Or perhaps the speaker has an accent that you're not used to, and so they pronounce the words differently. Or it may be words that you don't know, whether another language or just very technical vocabulary. I asked my husband for an example from his work, and he said he uses a tool called a colorimetric testing apparatus. And you use it for volumetric precision verification of the liquid handling arm of the company's laboratory automation system. Anyone follow that? Exactly. For short, he calls it the QC kit. It was a great example of this very technical language that can keep us from really listening and understanding. Or it could be what prevents you from listening is a poor connection where there's just too much static or too much background noise to be able to understand what you're hearing. There's lots of external factors that play a part in being able to listen well. This has been one of the problems with the rise of email and texting, is that unless you know the recipient really well, you have to be a little extra careful with your choosing your words, because inflection and tone of voice and other clues that we use when we communicate or orally don't always come through on emails and on texts. So you can't always tell what's a joke and what's sarcasm and what is someone actually being really upset about something. Some things that keep us from listening are outside our control, and we just simply do the best we can in spite of those things. Other things, though, that keep us from listening, though, are our own fault. And these have to do with what we're thinking while we're listening. The best listening is listening that focuses on the speaker. And unfortunately, it's human nature to focus on ourselves. Many times, we don't do a great job of listening because we're thinking of our response to what we're hearing. We're thinking of our own opinion on the topic. We're thinking of our own wants, our own fears, thinking about ourselves. How is this going to affect me? Too often, we're not focused on the speaker and what they're saying. We're focused on ourselves and our reaction and what we're going to say when the person finally stops speaking and it's our turn to stop listening and start speaking. And sometimes, of course, we're so focused on our own response that we interrupt the other person because we can't bear to listen anymore. We look forward to our turn to speak in a conversation, and we wait for our turn to speak. But how often do we look forward to or wait expectantly for our turn to listen? Both sides have to happen in any conversation, in any relationship. So perhaps we have to at least give them equal weight, if not more emphasis on the listening, since apparently it's the listening part that gives life. not the speaking part. Listen, and you will live. Listen, and you will find life. There are times when God commands his prophets to speak, when God compels people to speak up, like Moses, who has to go to Pharaoh to say, "Let my people go," or the prophet Jeremiah, who complains that when he tries to hold back and not speak God's word, then it feels like a fire in his bones. Yet I can't think of anywhere where death occurs as a result of not speaking. The book of James says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger." And here in the prophet Isaiah, God says, "Listen and come to me. Listen, and you will live. Listen, and you will live." This is a different kind of listening. This isn't listening in order to respond or to share your own opinion on the matter. This is listening with a different purpose. It's listening done in order to live. It's done in order to understand the speaker. And it's part of loving the speaker. We're told, love your neighbor as yourself. And we certainly listen to ourselves. How well do you listen to your neighbor? It can be a hard skill to practice. Just as speaking well is a skill, so is listening well. Listen for understanding, not in order to prove that you're right or to prove any point at all. When we're anxious or worried about something, we don't listen very well. Have you ever asked someone to call you back later or talk to you later because you've got too much going on right now? You can't listen to them right now? Or have you ever had something told to you or asked of you and you weren't completely paying attention and then later it came up again? And either you had no memory of it the first time, or the details were different from what you thought, or you knew of it but not the details. Does this sound familiar? A few nods? Okay. We don't listen well when we're preoccupied. Instead, when we practice good listening, we do it carefully and deeply. We listen with compassion and curiosity because we have a desire to understand and to connect. And that's listening to live. And we can't do it when we're overwhelmed. We can't do it when we're focused on ourselves. We can't do it when we're thinking about what we're going to say as soon as we get a turn. But deep, careful listening with curiosity and compassion, with a desire to understand and to connect, that's the kind of listening that leads to life. Listening is so important because it speaks to one of our deepest needs, which is the need to be or to feel understood. That someone else knows what you're going through and has compassion. In order for that to happen, the listener has to listen well in order to have compassion and to be able to see and understand what you're going through. Quite often we focus it on us. We want others to understand us. And so today, let's put the shoe on the other foot and focus on understanding others and where they're coming from and what their needs are and their heartfelt desires. Listening acknowledges and honors the uniqueness of each one of us. The fact that we're all made in God's image, the fact that we are all God's children. Regardless of whether we agree, regardless of what we think of the other person's situation, listening is a way to love. And the heart of good listening is authenticity and genuine curiosity and caring. If you don't know that your listener cares, then you're not likely to feel understood. So as listeners, let us care for the person we're listening to. We could add to that Hebrews passage about entertaining angels unawares by saying, don't neglect to open up your homes or your hearts or your ears to guests. Because by doing this, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Relationships are speaking and listening. And we focus a lot on our turn to speak. So I'd encourage us to do something different and take a chance and start putting more focus on our turn to listen. Listen with your heart. Listen with empathy. Acknowledge the other person's feelings. This is something I've started doing with Isabel lately when she gets upset. Because she doesn't even always know why she's upset. And she hasn't learned the names for all of her feelings. And so instead of reacting to her outburst with an outburst of my own, which is very tempting, when I can, instead, I wrap my arms around her and I tell her that I know she's feeling frustrated or sad or whatever the emotion is that I can best name as accurately as possible. And I give her the reason for her emotion too. I know you're sad because your TV show's over and you want to watch it more. I know you're frustrated because you want to play with that toy and your brother has it. More often than not, naming the emotion and the reason behind it calms her down And then she can move on to the next activity. Now with an adult, we might rephrase that a little more gently. It sounds like you're feeling sad because this happened, or you're really frustrated about this situation, aren't you? Because even as adults, we can't always, or don't always recognize our feelings or the reason we're feeling a certain way. And then if someone's unreasonably upset, we might be able to gently point out to them as well. Or point that out to them, or the damage that their words are causing. As good listeners and people who love our neighbors, it's one way we can show each other love and build each other up. Because that's why we're in relationship with each other. We listen not just so that we might individually live, but so that we can help each other live as well. And helping each other live means doing things like listening that bring us together. If you've ever noticed, when you listen, listening so that you can respond tends to divide people. It often brings the whole group down. Sharing your opinion without listening to others' opinions tends to be divisive, and no one feels loved and acknowledged and part of the group. But listening to understand can bring us together. It's part of how we build each other up, part of how we build up our church. Speaking ill of others, listening to other people badmouth others, that brings all of us down. So as a listener, when it's your turn, you may want to gently point that out to the speaker. And let's bring each other up. Let's unite and not divide. Let's listen to each other, not to respond or to give our own opinions, but with compassion, seeking to understand the other person and where they're coming from. Let's serve and be there for each other in this Christian walk together. Thanks be to God. Amen.